Imagine soaring thousands of feet above the vast, untamed expanse of the Pacific Ocean.
Oh, that's a beautiful image to start with.
Right. The wind up here is sharp, and it's carrying this heavy, stinging scent of salt spray and just, endless horizons. It whips vigorously against your sleek cinnamon brown wings, but you hold your course with effortless grace.
Because you were suspended in a brilliant, cloudless sky with the sun just beating down on your back.
Exactly. And far beneath you, the water is a chaotic, mesmerizing swirl of deep, almost blackish blue, broken only by the frothy white foam crashing relentlessly against jagged, charcoal-colored volcanic rocks.
So as you ride those invisible thermal currents of the ocean breeze, your mind is entirely quiet.
Completely focused.
Completely. Your sharp, piercing eyes are scanning that restless water with an intensity that humans can barely comprehend. You are waiting, watching, and then suddenly you spot it.
Just beneath the churning surface, a shimmering, brilliant flash of silver.
It's barely a glint, really. Just a mirror-like reflection catching the sunlight right through the waves. A fish.
And ancient instinct immediately takes over. There is no hesitation, no calculation at all. It's just pure biological programming.
You fold your long, swept-back wings incredibly tight against your sides. You completely change your aerodynamic profile.
Yeah, you transform your entire body into a living, feathered torpedo. Gravity seizes you, and you start to plummet. You're falling faster, 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 reaching a dizzying 60 miles per hour.
The wind is screaming in your ears. It's a deafening roar.
And the hard, shimmering surface of the ocean is rushing up to meet you at terrifying speed. You point your sharp beak perfectly straight down, making your body as aerodynamic as a missile.
With a massive, resounding thwack, you break the hard ocean surface.
You slice right through the water, leaving nothing but a momentary bubbling ring of white foam behind. The silence of the underwater world instantly replaces the roar of the wind.
And in a fraction of a second, before the fish even registers the disturbance in the water, you snatch that slippery silver prize right in your sharp beak.
You swallow your well-earned meal whole, and as you float back up to the surface to catch your breath, you paddle the water using your absolute most magical feature.
You look down, and paddling vigorously in the sparkling blue water is a pair of bright, glowing, neon turquoise blue webbed feet.
Welcome back to Saltwater Stories. Today we are bringing you the incredible tale of the master aerial acrobat you just imagined. The magnificent, the wonderful, the utterly surprising blue-footed booby.
It is a creature of absolute wonder. This bird truly represents the magic, the resilience, and, well, the wild, untamed beauty of the global ocean ecosystem.
It really does. Now, catching a fish with a 60-mile-per-hour faceplant is only half the battle.
It's not even half, honestly.
Right. We need to set the stage for exactly how wild and unpredictable this bird's daily life truly is. Because the ocean is not a peaceful place. It is an arena.
Oh, absolutely. So picture our blue-footed friend, belly full of that delicious silverfish, happily flapping its way back home toward its rocky island.
The sun is shining, the ocean breeze is at its back.
Exactly. But suddenly, a massive, terrifying shadow blocks out the sun.
It's the magnificent frigate bird.
Mm.
Now, if you haven't seen a frigate bird, picture a giant pirate of the sky.
A very accurate description.
It has an unbelievable 8-foot wingspan. It is jet black, angular, and looks like a prehistoric fighter jet. And right now, it is looking for a free meal.
Because the frigate bird is a master of the air, but it has a massive evolutionary weakness.
Which is so weird for a seabird.
It is. Most seabirds have a special gland that coats their feathers in waterproof oil. The frigate bird does not have enough of this oil.
So what happens if it lands in the water?
Well, if a frigate bird lands in the ocean to catch a fish, its feathers act like a giant sponge. They get completely soaked, the bird becomes hopelessly waterlogged, and it can actually drown.
A seabird that can drown in the sea. That is wild, which means the pirate cannot hunt in the water. It has to hunt in the sky.
Yes. So it chooses a life of midair piracy. In the scientific community, we actually call this kleptoparasitism.
Kleptoparasitism.
Literally, parasitism by theft. And the way they do it is by playing the most high-stakes, terrifying game of midair tag you could possibly imagine.
Okay, so the pirate bird folds its massive wings and swoops down like a guided missile, targeting our blue-footed hero.
And it doesn't just chase the booby, it physically attacks it in midair.
Wow.
The frigate bird will use its hooked beak to literally bite our bird's tail feathers or wingtips right out of the sky.
Just grabs right on, and then it violently shakes the smaller bird. Our blue-footed friend is tumbling through the air, completely panicked, losing altitude, getting tossed around by a giant angry shadow.
It's terrifying. So to escape this terrifying assault, the booby relies on an emergency reflex.
Which is so gross, but so effective.
It regurgitates or, throws up the fish just caught.
It just drops its hard-earned meal right out of its beak, surrendering the prize.
Yeah. And here is the truly spectacular part. The instant the fish falls from the booby's beak, the frigate bird lets go.
It completely ignores the booby at that point.
Exactly. It folds its wings, swoops down into a steep dive, and snatches the falling fish right out of the air before it even hits the ocean waves.
It is a thrilling, totally wild mid-air robbery. The frigate bird gets a dry, fresh meal, and the booby lives to fish another day.
It's a perfect transaction of survival.
It sets the stage perfectly for a bird whose entire life is one magnificent, extreme ocean adventure. They survive pirate attacks, they hit the ocean like an Olympic diver gone rogue, and they navigate a brutal environment.
They do.
Yet historically, humans gave this incredible survivor a really silly name.
The history of the name booby is incredibly ironic when you consider the immense physical capabilities of this animal. To understand how they got this name, we have to travel back in time hundreds of years to the days of the early Spanish sailors and European explorers navigating the vast, uncharted Pacific Ocean.
Picture the scene. You are a sailor on a creaking wooden galleon in the 1500s. You have been at sea for months. You're exhausted, hungry, and dealing with scurvy.
Not a great time.
Not at all. Finally, land appears on the horizon. You drop anchor near the Galápagos Islands. You row a small boat to the rocky shore, step onto the land, and you see these big, beautiful brown and white birds just sitting there on the rocks.
Now, normally, if a loud, lumbering human walks right up to a wild bird, the bird's survival instincts kick in. It flies away in an absolute panic.
Pigeons in a park.
Exactly. But these birds had a completely different evolutionary history. They had lived on these isolated volcanic islands for millions of years with absolutely no large land predators.
There were no wolves, no big cats, no dogs, and definitely no humans.
None. They lived in an environment we call ecological naivete. They literally had never learned the concept of fear because there was nothing on land to be afraid of.
So the sailors walked right up to them, and the birds just looked up, blinked, and went right back to preening their feathers, completely unbothered.
Because the birds didn't flee or defend themselves, the sailors made a massive, arrogant assumption.
They sure did.
They assumed the birds were unintelligent. They called them bobo, which is a Spanish term that roughly translates to clown, foolish, or stupid.
Over the centuries, English-speaking sailors adopted the word, and bobo morphed into the English word booby.
That's exactly right.
Now, I have to push back on those early sailors because it feels so entirely unfair to the bird. Calling this bird foolish for not being afraid of a human on a remote island is like saying a polar bear is foolish because it doesn't know what to do at a red traffic light.
Oh, that is a brilliant way to frame it. I love that.
Like, it's just out of context.
Right. You simply cannot judge an animal's intelligence or capability by a set of rules from an environment it has never experienced.
Exactly. The bird isn't foolish at all. It is perfectly adapted to a completely different world. If you think about it from an energy conservation standpoint, flying takes a massive amount of calories.
Huge amounts.
Why would a bird waste all its precious hard-earned energy flying away at a panic when for a million years, nothing on that island had ever tried to hurt it?
It's precisely the opposite of foolish. It is highly efficient. And we have to remember, the environment they are perfectly adapted to is anything but easy.
Oh, man. Yeah.
The Galapagos Islands are not the lush, green, tropical rainforests filled with waterfalls and fruit trees that people often picture when they hear the word island.
Oh, not at all. If you step onto the Galapagos, especially the coastal areas where these birds live, you are standing on a harsh, sun-baked chain of charcoal black volcanic rocks.
It's basically a hardened lava flow.
Yeah, it is hardened, jagged lava sitting directly on the Earth's equator where the sun is just brutally, relentlessly hot.
Yeah.
The black rocks absorb the heat until they are practically baked.
It looks almost prehistoric, like the surface of the moon mixed with a desert.
Totally.
And yet this dry, rocky, intensely hot volcanic landscape supports millions of seabirds, penguins, marine iguanas, and sea lions.
Which brings up a fascinating ecological mystery. Like, how does a barren, baking rock in the middle of the ocean support such an incredible explosion of life?
It's a great question.
I love this mystery because the answer isn't on the land at all. The secret to life on those black rocks is entirely about the magic happening under the waves. We are talking about the massive, invisible rivers flowing beneath the surface of the ocean.
Because the ocean is constantly in motion, driven by wind, temperature, and the rotation of the Earth.
Right.
Beneath the surface, there are global conveyor belts of water. One of the most important for our blue-footed friend is called the Cromwell Current.
Let's trace the journey of the Cromwell Current because it's basically the lifeblood of the Pacific. This is a deep, freezing, cold, underwater river.
Very cold.
It travels across the ocean, flowing deep along the dark, high-pressure ocean floor. And as it travels through the dark, it acts like a giant sweep, gathering up centuries of accumulated vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. Things like decayed organic matter and marine snow that have sunk to the bottom over thousands of years.
It is an incredibly nutrient-rich, heavy flow of cold water, and it moves steadily eastward until suddenly encounters a massive geographical roadblock.
The Galápagos Islands. But the islands aren't just little rocks floating on top of the water. They are the very tips of massive volcanic mountains jutting straight up from the deep sea floor. So you have this freezing, nutrient-packed underwater river rushing along the dark bottom of the ocean, and then bam, it slams right into the solid rock walls of these underwater volcanoes.
It's quite a collision when that fast-moving, heavy, cold water hits the immovable volcanic slope. It has absolutely nowhere to go but up.
It's an upwelling elevator. I love visualizing it this way. The volcanic wall forces this deep-sea river to rush straight up toward the sun.
That's a great way to picture it.
It acts as a giant oceanic elevator, bringing all those centuries of hidden deep-sea vitamins and natural fertilizers from the pitch-black ocean floor all the way up to the sunny, warm photic zone at the surface.
The scientific mechanism of upwelling is one of the most vital processes on our planet. When those cold, nutrient-dense waters hit the warm sunlight at the surface, it triggers an absolute explosion of life.
It sets off a magical chain reaction. The deep-sea nutrients act as super fertilizer for microscopic plant-like organisms called phytoplankton.
Right.
With the sun and the fertilizer, the phytoplankton bloom in massive, swirling clouds that can literally be seen from space. And those microscopic plants are the base of the food web.
Following the phytoplankton are massive schools of tiny silver pelagic fish, specifically sardines and anchovies.
Billions of them.
They arrive in the millions, forming giant, glittering bait balls to feast on the microscopic plants.
And waiting right above those massive schools of silver sardines are spectacular blue-footed acrobat.
Ready to dive.
Exactly. The entire ecosystem, the very survival of our bird, the life of the sea lions, the penguins, all of it depends entirely on that invisible underwater elevator bringing fertilizer to the sun. Everything is beautifully, delicately connected.
The cold, deep water feeds the sunlit plants feed the fish, and the fish feed the bird. It is a perfect, continuous loop of energy transfer.
And this brings us to one of the most dazzling biological tricks in all of nature. Because those massive schools of sardines don't just fill the booby's belly, they literally, physically paint the bird's feet.
It is true, and it's so fascinating. When a blue-footed booby chick is first born, breaking out of its egg, its feet are not blue at all.
They aren't.
No, they are very pale, almost a dull, ghost-like gray or a faint whitish color.
Wow. So they aren't born wearing their famous neon blue shoes. They have to earn them through their hunting skills.
Exactly right.
To understand how a bird gets blue feet from eating silver fish, we have to look at the chemistry of their diet.
The secret ingredient is locked inside the flesh of the sardines they eat. Those fish consume the phytoplankton, and through that diet, their bodies become packed with special organic pigments called carotenoids.
Carotenoids. If that word sounds familiar to anyone, it's because it's the exact same natural pigment that gives carrots their bright orange color, or makes autumn leaves turn yellow and red. They are vibrant, natural yellow and orange dyes.
Now, you might be noticing a color discrepancy here.
Yeah, the fish providing yellow pigments.
Yeah.
But the bird's feet are famously turquoise blue.
Right. If I eat a bunch of yellow pigments, I don't turn blue. So how does yellow fish food turn into neon blue feet?
It all comes down to the microscopic structure of the bird's skin.
The skin on the booby's feet naturally contains specialized microscopic collagen structures. These structures are designed to scatter incoming light in a very specific way, bouncing back blue light waves.
Okay, so they have blue light bouncers built in.
Basically. On its own, this structural coloration makes the skin look like a very dull, dark, purplish blue.
But then comes the magic of digestion. When the bird eats the sardine, its stomach breaks down the fish, but it saves those yellow carotenoid pigments.
It's so efficient.
The yellow pigments travel through the bird's bloodstream all the way down to the webbing of its feet. And when that bright chemical yellow pigment mixes with the natural, structural, purplish-blue skin, it's like nature's paint mixing.
It really is.
Yellow and blue combine to create that glowing, vibrant neon turquoise color.
It is a stunning visual display. But in biology, bright colors are rarely just for decoration.
Oh, definitely not.
These carotenoid pigments serve a profoundly important life-saving purpose inside the bird's body.
They are essentially the bird's medicine, right?
Yes. Carotenoids act as powerful antioxidants. They are the frontline defenders of the bird's immune system. They patrol the bird's body, trapping harmful molecules called free radicals, fighting off diseases, dealing with parasites, and keeping the booby incredibly strong and healthy.
This creates a fascinating internal conflict for the bird. The booby's body has to make a constant biological choice.
A very tough choice.
It can use those carotenoids internally to stay healthy and fight off sickness, or it can deposit them externally into the feet to look vibrant and beautiful.
It's a literal balancing act. If a bird catches a minor illness, or if the ocean gets warm and the fish disappear, causing the bird to go hungry for just 48 hours.
2 days, that's so fast.
The bird's body goes into emergency mode. It immediately pulls those yellow carotenoids out of the feet and sends them to the immune system to help fight off the sickness or keep the organs running.
And the visual result of that internal shift is striking. Within just 2 days of going hungry or getting sick, the glowing blue feet fade. They lose their vibrancy and turn back to a dull, sickly gray.
The feet act as a real-time, highly visible health monitor.
Think of it exactly like the battery meter on a video game controller.
Ooh, I like that.
If the battery is fully charged, the light on the controller glows bright neon. But if the battery is dying, the light goes dull or flashes gray.
Very true.
The booby's feet show every other bird on the island exactly how healthy, strong, and successful that specific bird is at that exact moment in time.
In behavioral ecology, we refer to this as an honest signal.
An honest signal.
Yes, it is a physical trait that is biologically impossible to fake. A bird cannot pretend to be a good hunter. You cannot have bright blue feet unless you are currently actively catching massive amounts of fresh fish.
It's the ultimate proof of skill. And that honest signal becomes the single most important factor when it is time to find a partner to start a family.
Oh, absolutely.
The courtship dance of the blue-footed booby is, without a doubt, one of the most charming, hilarious, and complex performances you can witness in the animal kingdom.
It is a meticulously choreographed spectacle.
Tell us how it starts.
Well, when a male booby decides he is ready to find a mate, he doesn't rely on building a massive, complex nest out of woven grass or twigs to impress her. Instead, he focuses entirely on the dance floor.
The dance floor.
He finds a nice flat piece of dark volcanic rock, clears away any debris, and he waits.
And when a female walks by, looking for a strong partner with good genes, he turns on the absolute charm. He stands up incredibly tall, pointing his beak slightly upward, puffs out his chest to look as large as possible, and he begins this exaggerated, slow-motion, high-stepping march.
It's so deliberate. He carefully lifts one neon blue foot high into the air, pauses for just a moment so the female can fully inspect the color, and then slaps it back down on the rock with a soft thud.
And then the other one.
Then he slowly lifts the other foot. Left, right, left, right.
He's parading around like, look at the shoes. Look how incredibly bright they are.
Exactly.
He is literally shoving his video game health bar right in her face, proving to her without a single word that he is a master fisherman, that his immune system is invincible, and that he will be an excellent father who can provide for their chicks.
And sometimes, to add a little extra romance, he'll find a small twig or a perfectly smooth pebble on the ground, pick it up, and formally bow down to present it to her as a courtship gift.
That is just too cute. His incredibly charming behavior. But the visual display of the feet and the gifts is only half of the performance, right?
Correct. The dance is accompanied by a highly specific acoustic component. They use distinct vocal signatures to communicate during this courtship.
The acoustic display is often called the sky pointing move. While he's doing his high-stepping march, the male will suddenly stop, point his sharp beak perfectly straight up to the heavens, cock his tail feathers upward, rotate his wings so the tips point to the sky, and he lets out a very specific sound.
And what's wild is that the males and females sound completely fundamentally different from one another.
How so?
Due to subtle differences in their vocal anatomy, the male lets out a very high-pitched, drawn-out, wheezy, almost whistling sound. It sounds a bit like a deflating balloon.
A deflating balloon, okay.
The females, on the other hand, who are noticeably larger and heavier than the males, answer back with a deep, raucous, rough honk.
A wheezy whistle and a rough honk. If you close your eyes and just listen in the middle of a breeding colony, you can tell exactly which gender is communicating.
Beyond just identifying males and females, these acoustic signatures serve a critical practical purpose.
Right, because there are thousands of them.
Exactly. Every single bird has a slightly different microscopic pitch, rhythm, and tone to their whistle or their honk. It is as unique as a human fingerprint.
It's just their own personal ringtone, which is essential because these birds don't nest alone. They live in massive colonies with thousands of other birds, all honking, whistling, squawking, and flapping at the same time. The noise is deafening.
It's chaotic.
But because of those unique vocal fingerprints, mates can find each other instantly in the chaotic crowd just by listening for their specific partner's honk or whistle.
But, to keep those vocal cords strong, to keep the energy up for the dance, and most importantly, to keep those feet blindingly blue, the bird must successfully hunt.
They gotta eat.
And that requires us to look closely at the biomechanics of surviving the drop, because catching a fish means routinely performing one of the most extreme physical feats in nature.
The high-speed plummet. We touched on this in the beginning, but we really need to pause and examine the physics here. They are hitting the dense surface of the ocean at 60 miles per hour.
It's incredibly fast.
Let's put that in perspective for humans. Think about driving down the highway at 60 miles per hour. Now imagine unrolling the window, sticking your head out, and slamming your face into a solid brick wall of water.
Ouch.
Water does not compress easily. Hitting it at that speed should instantly snap their fragile bird necks and crush their skulls. How are they surviving this dozens of times a day?
It is a marvel of evolutionary engineering, really. A masterclass in structural biology and physics. Over millions of years, the booby has evolved highly specialized, hidden anatomical features specifically designed to dissipate the kinetic energy of that impact.
They basically have built-in crash test safety features.
That's a perfect analogy.
Let's start with the head.
Inside the booby skull, situated just beneath the skin and surrounding the delicate brain tissue, the bird has a network of highly specialized, spongy bone structures and air sacs.
Biological airbags?
Exactly like airbags in a car. When the bird's sharp beak first pierces the surface tension of the water, a massive shock wave of kinetic energy travels rapidly up the skull.
That sounds dangerous.
It would be. But instead of transferring that destructive force into the brain, those spongy air sacs compress. They absorb and scatter the massive shock, insulating the brain from the trauma.
So the airbags protect the brain from turning to mush. But what about the neck? Birds have incredibly thin, fragile, flexible necks so they can preen their feathers.
They do.
Flexibility is the opposite of strength. A flexible neck hitting water at 60 miles per hour would fold in half and snap.
Which is why the booby relies on supreme muscular timing. Just a millisecond before impact, the booby fires a very specific, powerful set of muscles running along its cervical vertebrae.
Like tensing up before a punch.
Yes, but this violent muscular contraction locks the bones of the spine together into a totally rigid, inflexible column.
The flexible neck instantly turns into a solid, unbreakable spear. It transfers the force straight down to the heaviest part of their body. That is incredible biomechanics.
It really is.
But diving face first brings up another logistical nightmare. If a human jumped from a high dive and hit the water face first at 60 miles per hour, the sheer pressure would force gallons of water painfully up your nose. It would blow out your sinuses.
The hydrostatic pressure would be agonizing. But the booby has solved this problem through a fascinating evolutionary deletion. Their external nostrils are permanently sealed shut.
Wait, they evolved to lose their nostrils?
They did. If you look closely at the beak of a blue-footed booby, where the nostrils should be, you just see smooth, solid bone and tissue. The openings have been completely closed over by evolution.
That's wild.
Because they're smooth, the high-pressure water simply glides perfectly over the aerodynamic beak without any openings for the water to blast into the respiratory system.
That is genius. It makes them perfectly hydrodynamic. But wait, let's follow the logic here. If their nostrils are glued shut with bone, How on earth do they breathe when they're just sitting on the rocks or flying around the ocean? They
No,
still need oxygen.
they do, and they rely on a secondary breathing system. They breathe entirely through tiny, highly specialized slits located deep in the very corners of their mouths.
Oh, in the corners of their mouths.
Yes, it is an adaptation perfectly suited for a life divided between the open air and high-speed underwater diving.
Okay, secondary breathing slits, that makes sense. But analyzing their anatomy brings up another massive question for me, a question of basic survival chemistry.
Okay, what's that?
These birds live on volcanic islands that are basically baked deserts. There is virtually no fresh drinking water. They spend their entire lives diving into salty ocean water, swallowing mouthfuls of salty seawater, and eating whole fish that are full of salt.
Very true.
How do they not get completely fatally sick from all that sodium? If a human drank seawater, our kidneys would shut down.
You have hit on one of the greatest challenges of marine life. The concentration of salt a booby consumes daily would rapidly cause extreme dehydration and organ failure in a human, but the bird has evolved a hidden, built-in desalination plant.
A desalination plant inside a bird, where is it?
Tucked safely just above their eye sockets. Beneath the skin of the skull are highly specialized organs called salt glands.
How do these salt glands actually work? Because the salt is in their stomach, not their eyes.
It is a process of incredible blood filtration. When the bird digests a salty sardine and swallows incidental seawater, all that sodium is absorbed through the stomach lining and enters the bird's bloodstream.
Okay, so it gets into the blood.
Right. As the heart pumps that salty blood around the body, it eventually flows through a network of tiny capillaries that pass right next to these salt glands above the eyes.
And the glands act like tiny, highly efficient vacuums. Through active cellular transport, the glands pull the excess sodium and chloride ions directly out of the blood.
Exactly.
They essentially scrub the blood clean of the toxic salt. But once the gland has vacuumed up all this salt, where does it go?
The gland concentrates the salt into a highly dense, extremely salty liquid brine. Now remember, the bird has no external nostrils for this liquid to easily drain out of.
Oh, right, the sealed nostrils.
So, the brine trickles down a specialized internal groove inside the beak, pooling near the tip. Then, with a quick shake of the head, the bird literally sneezes out this super salty liquid.
They sneeze out concentrated salt water. It just drips right off the end of the beak.
It's quite a sight.
That is a bona fide biological superpower. They have impact-absorbing airbags, rigid spear necks, sealed hydrodynamic beaks, and salt-sneezing filtration plants in their heads. They're practically cyborgs engineered by the ocean.
They are exquisitely adapted for marine survival, but the irony is the greatest challenges often occur when they are entirely stationary on land.
Really, when they're just sitting there.
Yes, because while they are engineered for the cold ocean, they have to survive the blistering heat of the equator to raise their young. The dark volcanic rocks absorb the intense solar radiation, turning the nesting colony into a literal oven. And as we know, birds do not have sweat glands.
So how do they beat the equatorial heat? They can't just go sit under a leafy green tree because there is no shade on hardened lava flow. They just have to sit out in the baking sun.
To avoid fatal heat stroke, they employ two primary thermoregulation strategies. The first relies on the moisture inside their bodies. It is a behavior called adderler fluttering.
Which looks a little bit like a dog panting on a hot summer day, right?
The principle of evaporative cooling is the same, yes. The bird opens its beak wide and rapidly, vigorously vibrates the soft, fleshy skin of its throat pouch, the gular area.
Just vibrating it really fast.
Very fast. This rapid fluttering motion actively pumps air back and forth over the moist mucous membranes inside the mouth and throat. As the moisture evaporates into the dry air, it absorbs heat energy, which actively cools the blood circulating through the throat tissues.
So they use a vibrating throat fan to cool their blood. That is clever. But the second strategy, well, it is delightfully gross, highly effective, and involves those beautiful blue feet. I know our younger listeners are going to find this fascinating.
It is a brilliant, if messy, physiological adaptation. The scientific term for this behavior is urohydrosis.
Urohydrosis. Let's translate that out of the scientific Latin and into plain English. What does a bird doing urohydrosis actually look like?
When the ambient temperature climbs dangerously high and the bird is at risk of overheating, it will intentionally, purposefully excrete liquid waste poop directly onto its own large webbed feet.
It poops on its own feet. It spends all that time eating fish to turn its feet bright, glowing neon blue to impress a partner, and then it just covers them in liquid waste. Why would it intentionally soil its own display features?
It all comes down to the thermodynamics of those feet because the booby's webbed feet are so large and flat they have a massive surface area.
Right.
Just beneath the skin of those webs is a dense, intricate network of blood vessels. When the wet liquid waste sits on the hot surface of the feet, the water within the waste begins to rapidly evaporate in the scorching sun.
And physics dictates that evaporation requires heat.
Exactly. As the liquid turns into vapor, it pulls the thermal energy out of the feet. This rapid evaporation significantly cools the blood circulating in the webs. That freshly chilled blood is then pumped by the heart back into the main body, effectively lowering the bird's entire internal core temperature.
It's a built-in liquid cooling system. Humans invented fancy electric fans and chemical air conditioners to survive the heat, but birds just use a much, much messier built-in cooling loop. Hey, nature doesn't care if it's pretty as long as it keeps you alive.
And staying alive is paramount, especially when you consider that parent birds must sit absolutely still on those sun-baked rocks for weeks at a time to incubate their eggs and protect their chicks. They cannot leave to jump in the ocean to cool off, or their family would perish.
Which perfectly transitions us to the wild world of their family life. And funny enough, their family life starts with yet another highly specific, very important use for their poop.
Indeed, the nesting behavior of the booby is wonderfully unique. Most land birds build intricate, cozy nests woven from twigs, soft grass, mud, or moss to cradle their eggs.
But the booby doesn't have twigs or soft grass on a lava flow, so they just lay their eggs on the bare, hard rock.
They do, but they meticulously prepare the real estate first. They create a visible boundary known as a guano ring.
Guano being poop.
Guano is the scientific term for accumulated seabird droppings, which are bright white due to the high concentration of uric acid.
Paint a picture of this construction process. How do you build a ring out of guano?
The parent bird chooses a flat, smooth piece of volcanic rock. It stands firmly in the exact center of its chosen spot. Then, as it digests its meals, it slowly, deliberately pivots in a circle, stepping around that central axis. As it turns, it forcefully squirts the bright white guano outward in an even radius.
So it's basically acting like a biological compass, drawing a perfect, bright white circle on the pitch-black rock using its own waste. It creates a stark, highly visible target.
This ring is of the utmost social importance. In a colony packed with thousands of aggressive, noisy birds, this white circle is their absolute property line. It acts as a glaring, unmistakable do not enter sign. If a neighboring bird steps even one toe over the white line, a vicious beak fight will break out.
This is my house, this is my personal space, stay out of my circle. It's a visual fence.
Precisely. And safely inside the very center of that white circle, the female booby will lay her eggs, usually a clutch of 1 to 3. But the incubation process introduces another physical marvel.
More physical marvels.
Most birds, like chickens or eagles, have a specialized bare patch of skin on their warm bellies called a brood patch. They cluck their own feathers to press their hot skin directly against the eggs to keep them warm.
But not the blue-footed booby.
No, they lack a brood patch entirely. Instead, the booby parents carefully, gently step onto their own eggs.
Wait, they step on them with their full weight. Doesn't the big, heavy bird crush the delicate eggshells?
They are incredibly delicate and precise in their movements. They use those large, webbed blue feet. The same dense network of blood vessels that they use for evaporative cooling can also be used as a heating system.
Oh, that makes sense.
The parent gently wraps its warm, soft, fleshy blue webs completely around and over the curved eggshells. The feet act like living, heated blankets, transferring the bird's core body heat directly to the developing chicks inside, keeping them at the perfect incubation temperature.
That is strangely adorable. They use their beautiful blue feet as little heated egg incubators. But the timeline of how these eggs are laid and the way they hatch sets up a really intense, incredibly dramatic situation in the nest.
It absolutely does. It introduces us to the harsh, pragmatic realities of nature. The mother booby does not lay her clutch of eggs all at the exact same time. She lays them sequentially, several days apart.
Okay, let's trace the math on this. If the mother lays egg number 1 on a Monday, and she waits to lay egg number 2 until Thursday,
then the chick inside egg number 1 gets a massive head start on development. It is going to hatch days before the chick in egg number 2. In ornithology, we call this asynchronous hatching.
Asynchronous, meaning out of sync. They are on different timelines.
Correct. And a 3 or 4 day age gap might not seem like much to a human, but in the fast-growing world of bird chicks, it is an eternity. By the time the second younger chick finally breaks out of its shell, the firstborn chick is already substantially larger, much stronger, louder, and highly coordinated.
And this size difference leads to a behavior called facultative siblicide. Now, I want to explore this carefully because it sounds a little scary or sad at first, but in science, we have to look past our human emotions to understand the brilliance of why adaptations exist. Let's define facultative siblicide.
Let's break the terminology down. Siblicide refers to siblings competing against each other for survival, sometimes fatally. But the most important word in that phrase is facultative. Facultative means conditional, flexible, or optional depending on the environment.
So it isn't a hard rule. It doesn't always happen. It depends on the ocean.
Exactly. It all comes back to the upwelling elevator we discussed earlier. If the Cromwell Current is flowing strong, bringing up tons of nutrients, and the ocean is teeming with millions of sardines, the parents can catch huge amounts of food very quickly.
They come back loaded with fish.
Right. They return to the guano ring with full bellies. In that scenario of abundance, the parents feed both chicks until they're full. Both chicks eat, both grow up happy and healthy side by side, and they both eventually fly off to become beautiful blue-footed adults.
Peace in the nest. But the ocean is notoriously unpredictable. What happens if the weather changes, the ocean gets too warm, and the giant schools of fish just disappear?
If food becomes incredibly scarce, the parents will hunt all day but return with barely any fish. The chicks are starving. In this desperate situation, survival instincts override everything.
What does the older chick do?
The older, larger sibling, driven by a powerful biological imperative to survive, will aggressively demand all the food the parents bring. It will physically push, peck, and bully the younger, smaller sibling away from the parents, eventually forcing the tiny chick completely outside the white boundary of the guano ring.
And once that younger chick is pushed out of the ring, the parents simply ignore it. They won't feed it anymore, which sounds so unbelievably cruel to our human sensibilities. But we have to zoom out and look at the math of survival here. We need to understand why the parents allow this to happen instead of stopping the fight.
Think about the alternative. What would happen if the parents intervened?
If the parents tried to be fair and they took the two tiny fish they caught and split them equally between the two growing chicks, it wouldn't be enough calories for either of them. They would both slowly weaken. They would both starve.
By allowing the strongest, oldest chick to monopolize the limited food supply, the parents are making a grim but mathematically sound biological decision. They are ensuring that the family line doesn't die out completely. They guarantee that at least one strong, healthy baby survives the famine, rather than losing the entire generation.
It doesn't mean it's a brilliant, highly adaptable survival strategy.
Yeah.
It's nature making a very tough choice to navigate an unpredictable environment. And to really appreciate how smart and flexible our blue-footed friend is, we can compare them to their neighbors. There's another bird that lives on the exact same volcanic rocks called the Nazca booby.
The Nazca booby is a closely related cousin. They look similar and share the same habitat, but they evolved a completely different, much more rigid strategy for raising their young. They practice obligate siblicide.
Obligate, meaning mandatory, required, without exception. They always do it.
Yes. The Nazca booby parent also lays 2 eggs. But regardless of how much fish is in the ocean, even if there is a massive surplus of food and everyone could easily eat, the older Nazca chick is biologically programmed to aggressively attack and push the younger sibling out of the nest within days of hatching.
Wow. Every time.
It is an absolute biological guarantee. The second egg basically only exists as an insurance policy in case the first egg fails to hatch.
So compared to the rigid Nazca booby, the blue-footed booby is incredibly smart, flexible, and efficient. It adapts its family size dynamically to perfectly match the carrying capacity of the ocean that specific year. If there's plenty of food, everyone lives, and the population booms. If there's a famine, only the strongest lives. They're completely in tune with the rhythm of the sea.
They are intimately tied to the ocean's health. It is the ultimate adaptation to an unpredictable environment.
But here is the critical pivot in our story today. Because that incredible flexibility, that ancient rhythm they rely on, is being severely tested right now. The vast ocean around the Galápagos is rapidly changing, and the blue-footed boobies are trying to tell us something very important.
In the realm of marine biology and conservation, the blue-footed booby serves a vital role. They are what scientists refer to as a bioindicator species.
Bioindicator. I love breaking down this concept. A bioindicator is basically nature's check engine light. When you are driving a car and the check engine light on your dashboard suddenly flashes red, the light itself isn't the problem. The light is warning you that something hidden deep under the hood, something you can't easily see, is malfunctioning.
That is an exceptionally accurate analogy. The booby is the flashing check engine light for the entire eastern Pacific Ocean ecosystem.
How does a bird doing high-stepping dances on a rock act as a check engine light for millions of square miles of deep ocean?
It comes back to their highly specialized diet. Because the boobies rely almost exclusively on those massive schools of sardines, their daily health, their immune systems, and most importantly, their breeding success, perfectly mirror the hidden health of the fish populations deep below the waves.
Because they're the ones eating them.
Exactly. You can't easily look underwater and count millions of tiny fish, but you can easily stand on an island and look at the birds.
Scientists conducted a massive, fascinating study to prove this exact point, didn't they?
They did. It was a rigorous 13-year observational study. Researchers simply went to the nesting colonies and meticulously counted how many eggs the female boobies laid in their guano rings during the spring breeding season.
Just walking around with a clipboard, counting white eggs on black rocks in the spring.
And by correlating that simple egg data with complex oceanographic models, they discovered an incredible predictive pattern.
What did they find?
By analyzing the booby eggs in the spring, scientists could accurately predict exactly how many tons of sardines the massive commercial fishing fleets would catch months later during the winter fishing season.
That is mind-blowing. Let's connect the dots on that. The birds know the ocean's hidden health better than our most advanced radar, sonar, and satellite technology.
They have an ancient, instinctual pulse on the ocean. If the underwater upwelling is strong and the ocean is rich with fish, the females are well-fed and confident. They lay 2 or 3 eggs.
And if it's weak?
If the upwelling is weak and the fish are scarce, the females sense the famine. They hold back their energy, laying only 1 egg, or sometimes choosing not to nest at all, waiting for a better year.
But lately, the dashboard of the ocean has been flashing bright red. The check engine light is on. The booby population is crashing, isn't it?
The long-term data is deeply concerning. Since the 1960s, the population of blue-footed boobies, specifically in the Galápagos Islands, has plummeted by more than 50%.
50%. More than half the birds on those islands are just gone. Where did they go? Why did they disappear?
It ties directly back to the oceanic elevator we discussed in the beginning. Global climate patterns, specifically phenomena like El Niño, are fundamentally altering the temperature of the Pacific Ocean. El Niño events cause the surface waters of the eastern Pacific to become unusually warm.
And how does a layer of warm water hurt a bird flying in the air?
Think of that warm surface water like a massive, heavy thermal blanket sitting on top of the ocean. This warm blanket is so physically thick and buoyant that it suppresses the cold water below. It physically blocks the freezing, nutrient-rich Cromwell current from rising to the surface. The heat breaks the upwelling elevator.
Oh no, so the elevator gets stuck at the pitch-black bottom of the ocean. The fertilizer never reaches the sunlight.
And the chain reaction collapses. Without those deep-sea nutrients reaching the photic zone, the microscopic phytoplankton cannot bloom. They die off.
And if the microscopic plants die, the massive schools of silver sardines vanish because their food source is gone.
And without the dense bait balls of sardines to hunt, the adult boobies cannot sustain themselves. Their blue feet turn gray as their immune systems crash. They completely abandon their courtship dances, and they simply stop laying eggs.
They just stop.
They sit on the rocks, waiting out the warm water, hoping for the cold currents to return. But as the climate shifts, those cold, productive years are becoming rarer, and the warm, bearing years are becoming more frequent.
It's a devastating chain reaction that starts with a 1-degree change in water temperature and ends with empty, silent guano rings on the volcanic rocks. And the shifting climate isn't their only problem. They have historical challenges too, things that were brought to their isolated home by humans centuries ago.
Yes. The ecological naivete that makes them so charming also makes them incredibly vulnerable. During the 19th century, large whaling ships from all over the globe used the Galapagos Islands as a convenient resting spot to harvest fresh meat and water. And unfortunately, massive wooden ships inevitably carry stowaways: rats, mice, and feral cats. These non-native invasive species escaped from the ships and established populations on the islands. Remember, the boobies evolved for millions of years without any small, sneaky land predators. They lay their eggs directly on the open ground.
Because they never had a reason to be afraid, they never evolved the instinct to hide their nests in cliffs or trees like other birds. So a rat or a feral cat can just quietly walk right up to a guano ring in the middle of the night and steal a precious egg or attack a newly hatched chick. That is heartbreaking. When you look at the big picture, it sounds like they are facing an overwhelming number of terrifying threats: rapidly changing ocean temperatures, breaking their food chain, invasive predators stealing their young, and human overfishing competing for the sardines.
It can sound very daunting, perhaps even hopeless, but this is exactly where the narrative shifts. Because the most powerful, inspiring force currently working to protect these magnificent birds isn't just adult scientists in white lab coats or government politicians, it is actually young people.
Yes, this is my absolute favorite part of the story. I am so incredibly excited to share this with our listeners. We're going to talk about the story of the Gladstone brothers. This is absolute undeniable proof that anyone listening to us right now, no matter their age, has the power to literally change the world.
Let's delve into the story of Will Gladstone.
Will was just a kid. He was sitting in his fifth-grade classroom in Massachusetts, living thousands of miles away from the equator and the Galapagos Islands. And one day, in his science class, his teacher taught a lesson about the blue-footed booby.
A standard biology lesson.
Exactly. The teacher explained the amazing blue feet, the diving, and then shared the sad statistic that their population was dropping by 50%.
For most students, that is just another fact to memorize for a quiz. You do the homework, you turn in the worksheet, the bell rings, and you completely forget about it by the time you get to recess.
Exactly. Just another school assignment.
Yeah.
But Will didn't forget. He couldn't stop thinking about these amazing high-diving birds with the glowing blue feet. He felt a deep sense of empathy and a desire to help. But he was just a kid in the fifth grade in a total different country. What could he possibly do to fix a global ocean problem?
He could have easily decided it was too big a problem for a kid. Instead, he and his younger brother, Matty, got incredibly creative. They leveraged their imagination.
They decided they were going to start a conservation company. They officially named it the Bluefeet Foundation, and their central idea was brilliant in its sheer simplicity and its visual impact.
It was very clever.
They designed and manufactured pairs of bright, comfortable neon blue socks that perfectly exactly match the vibrant turquoise color of the booby's feet.
It is a fantastic, highly effective method for raising public awareness. When you wear bright neon blue socks to school or the park, people naturally ask, "Hey, why are your socks so bright?"
And that simple question gives you the perfect opening to tell them the amazing story of the bird, the upwelling currents, and the conservation crisis.
It turns everyone who wears the socks into an active storyteller. And the results of this idea were absolutely staggering. This wasn't just a cute little weekend school project that made a few bucks from their neighbors.
Oh no. Will and Maddie's idea exploded. They sold so many blue socks to people all over the world that these two kids raised over $80,000.
That is a phenomenal, truly substantial financial achievement. And the most important part is how they utilized those funds. Where did that $80,000 go?
They didn't keep a penny. They donated all of it directly to the Charles Darwin Foundation, which is the premier frontline scientific organization operating down in the Galapagos Islands.
And that money was put to excellent use.
That money was used by field scientists to buy highly expensive, state-of-the-art satellite tracking equipment. By attaching these tiny trackers to the birds, scientists could finally map exactly where the boobies fly to find fish during the warm El Niño years, allowing them to legally protect those specific stretches of the ocean from commercial fishing fleets.
It vividly demonstrates that you do not need a PhD in marine biology, decades of research experience, or immense personal wealth to make a massive, tangible impact on global conservation.
We enthusiastically, wholeheartedly endorse the mission of the Bluefeet Foundation. To all our young listeners out there absorbing this story today, your ideas matter. Your creativity is a superpower. No matter how small you think an idea is when you first sketch it out, like selling pairs of blue socks, it can literally snowball, change the world, and help save a majestic species thousands of miles away. You absolutely have the power to protect the ocean right from where you are sitting.
It simply requires deep curiosity, a spark of imagination, and the courageous willingness to just try something new.
Absolutely. Well, as I look at the clock, it is time to wrap up this incredibly deep and wide-ranging journey. Let's take a moment to quickly recap the absolute magic we've unpacked today.
We started by experiencing the visceral thrill of a 60-mile-per-hour ocean plummet, understanding how hidden biological airbags and evolutionarily sealed nostrils protect the bird from catastrophic impact.
We marveled at the hilariously charming high-stepping courtship dances and learned the complex digestive chemistry of how a belly full of yellow sardines magically turns into bright turquoise feet.
We uncovered the physiological genius of vacuuming and sneezing out pure salt to survive drinking seawater, and the thermodynamic trick of pooping on webbed feet to beat the brutal equatorial heat.
And we discovered how those bright blue feet act as a crucial bioindicator, nature's flashing check engine light for the entire eastern Pacific ecosystem, warning us when the deep ocean currents are shifting and the food web is in trouble.
It is a bird of extremes, perfectly bridging the harsh, baking volcanic land and the deep, mysterious, freezing sea.
I want to express a very deep, sincere, and genuine thank you to every single person listening. Thank you for sharing your valuable time, your boundless curiosity, and your wonderful imagination with us today as we explored this incredible animal.
The future of the ocean relies entirely on curious, engaged minds like yours.
It really does. And before we let you go, we want to leave you with a fun, provocative thought, a little imaginative exercise for you to mull over or discuss with your friends and family later today.
Think about all the extreme, highly specialized physical adaptations we discussed today.
Right. So here is the question. If you were a creature uniquely adapted to live out in the wild, harsh environment of the ocean, what one magical physical superpower would you choose to have? Would you want internal biological airbags so you could survive massive jumps off high cliffs? Would you want salt-filtering sneeze glands so you could effortlessly drink seawater on a boat? Or would you want feet that dramatically change color to show everyone exactly what your absolute favorite snacks are?
Just imagine walking into a room and your feet turn bright purple because you secretly ate a whole bowl of blueberries.
I think my feet would permanently turn the color of pepperoni pizza. It's a lot of fun to think about, but it also helps you realize just how magical, complex, and wildly inventive nature really is. Keep your eyes firmly on the horizon, keep asking amazing, difficult questions about how the world works, and keep your hearts wide open to the endless wonders of the sea.
The ocean is full of magnificent mysteries, just waiting for you to dive in and discover them.
See you next time on Saltwater Stories.